Good morning, everyone. My name is Edward Zdor. I'm from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and I'm Chukchi. So it's a small number of people on the far east of Russia, and we are, how do I call us, the Bering Strait country residents. I mean, Alaskan and Chukotskan people. So I'm an anthropologist, and my research is dedicated to the community where I grew up and raised my family. And my father is married mama hunters, and my mother from reindeer herding family. The purpose of my slides, we share it with Sheryl Rosa from United States U.S. Arctic Commission. So the purpose of my slide is to show you or to describe you how indigenous people of our region try to adapt not only to social cultural changes, but also to the climatic changes. It's very important because from my point of view, before I started to think about how climatic changes impact our community, I was thinking that most reason to change in our community life was social cultural change. I mean, westernization of our life. But when, with the time, I realized that that there is something wrong in my thoughts about my people, about my fellow co-villagers. So there is a general information about food, traditional food consumption in our region. Where there were two research. The first one was in Chukotka. I was a part of this research, and the second one was did by a team of fall. And this is not a season. It's a name. So, and you can see here the similarity in the numbers. So around 200 kilograms of meat, fish, and so on consumed per capita on Alaska side. At the same time, because we use different methods of survey, the numbers is a little bit different. But you can see here that the numbers is still the same. So look on these numbers. Around approximately 800 kilo per household. In average, maybe a household it's around 4 or 5 people. So it's the same 200 kilos per capita. So what's the reason? Because on the both sides of Bering Strait, people live the same style of life, which depend from the nature, which depend from sea and tundra. We got our food from what nature is give us. The same numbers connected to the fishing. You can see here. You can see here approximately. So again, 122 and 76 kilo per capita harvested in different years, but really close to each other. The idea of these numbers, the idea of this consumption amount is that we are strongly depend from what sea and tundra give us, and at least 50% of everyday diet depends from the sea. Situation with reindeer meat is a little bit different because it's a Bering Strait. We call it risk zone for reindeer herding. So the consumption of reindeer meat on Chukotka side is decreased last 20 years, and the reason for that is a kind of crisis of what I forgot your name. What you yesterday told us about in Yamal you have the private ownership on the reindeer herd, and in Chukotka the situation is really different. We had and we still have state owners' property of on the reindeer herding. So and from point of view of many researchers, the reason is just because of property. So, but the number is still the same. You can see here, Alaskan indigenous village really depend from the caribou hunting. They hunt very much, but the number is still the same. It's still. So I couldn't able find some reason for that, but anyway. And we also can see here the traditional processing of reindeer meat. It's not typical right now for Chukotka because most of reindeer meat processing through the modern plants. So this type of processing is future of just a reindeer herding camp. And returning back to the fish processing, the future of modern time of fish processing is indigenous people use salt. Use salt even for traditional drying method of processing. The main reason my interlocutors explained they use salt for processing of fish is just because of foggy and wetty condition of region. Maybe, but at the same time, I can also remember how me and my father processed the whitefish during the fall time. I remember when I started to fish with my father, we use a traditional method, which is a bag from the seal skin, and we put harvested whitefish inside of these bags. The temperature was around 0 degrees, so fish a little bit fermented, but at the same time it was still frozen. But today it is impossible because most fall-time fishing is plus 5, plus 10 degrees of Celsius. So we forced, indigenous people forced to use salt for processing. This is the best thing of Bering Strait region, marine mammal hunting. People came to this region several thousand years ago. Archaeologists told us the first permanent use of marine mammals began maybe 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, and the top of this art of life is whaling. Could you imagine the small coastal camp where just 20 or 30 people live? Could able to hunt bowhead whale or gray whales from 20 to 75 tons of weight. It's really art of life, art of survival. And you can see here the number of modern harvesting in the region, on the Alaska side and Chukotka side. And I would say, modern hunters, despite there is a gap between generations caused by boarding school and et cetera, the effectiveness of modern young hunters is still very high. It's the reason for that, high-tech tools. If you have weather forecast, if you have GPS, you can easily hunt much more, and especially, yes, the modern aluminum boats and outboard engine, they are really effective. I'm looking because I am afraid to miss something, some important thoughts about it. But at the same time, this gap, this effectiveness, this use of high-tech tools generate new gaps between traditional ecosystem approach and modern approach of indigenous villagers. Processing of marine mammal food, still the same. Oh, and I forgot to say you the ancient technique of marine mammal harvesting is still the same. We use the doglet harpoon, and we use the poop which is buoy and line. So hunters for 2,000 years ago used the same technique which use hunters today. This is my fellow classmates and his nephew with the same harpoon which was used during the millennia. And on the other photo, my cousin-in-law with his son harvested seal. So processing of marine mammal food still same. So you can see here, but there is some innovation which appeared during last maybe 2 decades. People started to use kind of Western method of processing: smoking, pickling, and salting again the products. When I first time realized this innovation, I was thinking it's just because people are really lazy and they have a gap between a tradition, so they are really bad people. But at the same time, when I realized that people just try to survive, we need the traditional products to be saved, to be stored, to be consumed during the long time, from this fall to next spring, and how we can do it using just traditional methods, which is not work good. What we know from the today's and yesterday presentation with ice cellar is falling. So this is really a problem today to store this food, and so people just looking for something to save the food. So there is some kind of summary of what I just said, and so people looking again, trying to find the best way to store the food. And again, my thought of person who is thinking, oh, maybe my fellow villagers is really lazy. We don't want to do what our ancestor did. So and just so it's not appropriate approach. I mean, from me as a researcher, from me as an indigenous activist. This is the walrus meat processing. Walrus meat is most desirable meat on Chukotka site. There is 2 main dishes which my interlocutors called the favorite dishes. This is the walrus soup. We call it sweet carrot. It's a kind of stew of walrus which boiling during a couple or 3 hours, and I would like to pay your attention on that. So it's kind of okay, gotcha. We all have just 5 minutes. No. Just me.
You should concentrate on the zone notice if you have time, otherwise the time is running out.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So I mean, boiling during 2 or 3 hours is something which actually epidemiologists asked us to do to avoid any gelmins. So in our habits, in our tradition, there are some methods which coincide with requests from the epidemiologist. But here you can see how walrus meat is processed. We make some roll from the skin, blubber, and meat, and when we put it on the ice cellar, on the top photo it's not a good time actually to make a fermented walrus meat, because you can see grass is still green, so it means the temperature is really warm. It's maybe end of July or early August, which is still summer. But so this meat is going to be very hour fermented, so maybe rotten. So, and sometimes people prefer to hunt walrus in fall time, and we're able to dig a hole in October when the temperature around 0, so it's much better. With the permafrost, conditional permafrost here, which able to make temperature around from -3 to -9 degrees of Celsius, which is very best temperature for fermentization. Yeah, and this is the time of my colleague Sheryl Rhodes.
Okay, so I know we don't have much time left. I'm going to fly through a few slides here related to animal disease and what Eduard has referred to as Indigenous Protocol. My name is Sheryl Rhodes. I work for the Arctic Research Commission. I'm a wildlife veterinarian and a wildlife biologist that specializes in marine mammal health. And I've have the pleasure of working with Eduard both at the university and in the field, and worked as the wildlife veterinarian for the North Slope Borough for many years, and was able to work in Russia. So if I had to kind of sum up this slide in one word, basically Indigenous Protocol involves, if it looks strange or acts strange, you basically don't harvest it. If when you are doing if for some reason you have harvested an animal that while you're butchering it, its organs look strange, generally they're just not eaten, they are discarded. And that's seen everywhere that I've worked with Indigenous people. It's just kind of a rule of thumb. But in terms of processing, avoiding animals that don't seem normal, processing quickly as possible, and eating only processed meat. And often the key is low temperature, perhaps not freezing, but keeping that temperature between -1 and -9, or for certain processing, and below 40 degrees. Oh, see, now I've got my U.S. Fahrenheit during handling. And drying and fermentation, as has already been mentioned, is other ways of processing. And there are things that happen. Mistakes can be made, and sometimes you can have entire communities that will get ill from certain situations. And one of the things that Eduard had mentioned to me was, historically there have been small coastal settlements along the coast, which may have been a preventative measure in terms of having large-scale sickness from humans eating an animal that is diseased. One of the good things about going on the second day is I could pull some things out and put some things in that kind of seemed like they worked better with things that had already been discussed. So there was a discussion yesterday about things that had been seen that maybe hadn't been solved, and this isn't the most satisfying of stories, but I did want to refer to this. I was on the U.S. delegation to the International Whaling Commission, and there was a report in that from Chukotka that there were some whales that had been being seen after 1998 that had a strong medicinal odor, a phenolic smell, and it could actually be smelled by the hunters when they were out in the whales below. And it was able to, they in some cases were able to avoid harvesting those whales. These tissues, when you smell them, they have a very strong odor, and one of the things that was very telling was that the sled dogs wouldn't even eat this meat that came from this. So, and the sled dogs in Chukotka are very hungry, so that was kind of a telling thing. And then one thing that was very interesting is when we spoke to a lot of the hunters that had consumed this meat, there was a numbing of the oral cavity that was experienced, and often there were skin rashes in contact areas, and people that did eat it tended to get very sick, but we did not have any reports of death. We were able to go over, we had a crew that went over, worked with Eduard and others, along with Chukot Tinro, and we were able to collect, we had some earlier samples that were in, again, political limbo in terms of trying to get marine mammal samples at all, but from Russia to the US is very difficult. We did get some over, but they had freeze-thawed like 1,000,000 times prior, and the samples were not in the greatest condition for analysis. Between 2008 and 2014, we had several field seasons where we were able to collect samples, and the plan was, via the International Whaling Commission, to submit these for a variety of different tests. To this day, they are still sitting in Russia, so unfortunately, this is a good case of when policy and politics prevent some of this work, and if there's a way that this could be addressed. I know the Arctic Research Commission is working on this as well with its scientific cooperation agreement. So hopefully we'll be able to get these samples someday. But if folks want to talk to me at the break, we have some ideas of what might be going on. And we did have some snap tests for harmful algal bloom, looking at some of those biotoxins while we were out there. But we weren't able to get to the field that year, so we haven't been able to do those tests yet. So anyhow, that was just one. I did want to say, I don't want to steal Mike Bruce's thunder because he's going to talk about this in his talk during his panel.
It's okay, I've only got 5 minutes.
Exactly. Well, I think I've got -5 now. So there was a workshop that was held in Alaska last March, and it looked at prioritizing zoonotic diseases, infectious diseases, and from the point of view of human, animal, and environmental health groups. And I just wanted to mention that you'll hear about this a little bit. We came up with a list of priority zoonoses and also a list of weighting. And if you notice, climate change was 0.008. And it struck me as if this process was done again, it would be interesting to see if it was done with a group of indigenous people as opposed to a group of kind of agency managers, how those results might look, if it would be the same or not. So it's kind of, I guess it's a recommendation to see. It would be interesting just to see. I think it would be a worthwhile exercise. And then my last slide is, I want to underline something that Emily said yesterday. It is extremely important to take into consideration the benefits, not just the scary things and the bad things that can come from eating a subsistence diet. We are tasked here with talking about disease and microbes today, and I have been firsthand witness to some of the side effects of scaring people. And so you have to really strike this balance between providing information and allowing the villages to really handle it themselves in terms of making decisions about how they want to respond. But fear-mongering usually does not serve anybody well. And so being culturally appropriate and very sensitive about the way these messages are brought across is very important. I'm going to let Eduard, would you like to wrap this up?
Yes, just 1 minute.
Okay, this is our last slide.
I just would like to emphasize when Cheryl and we worked on this presentation, we suddenly realized that indigenous knowledge or traditional knowledge is kind of indigenous protocol which help people to survive during the millennia. And this protocol sometimes does not coincide with epidemiological protocol. But anyway, it was really working thing, and what we have to know, what we have to keep in mind, this traditional knowledge, this traditional style of life, keep our identity safe. And my personal request, not as indigenous researcher, as just a representative of indigenous people, please let's work together on some kind of compromise between indigenous protocol and global protocol to make us safe. Thank you so much for your attention.